Welcome to the MCE Prep webinar. So over the next 45 to 50 minutes, what we're going to do is present to you a way of passing the MCE without stressing out. I mean, this is not something that should stress you. This is all about just making sure that you approach this test with the knowledge and the capabilities that you all obviously already have. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Veronica. I'm Principal Consultant here at Resolution Marketing. So I have a bunch of creds here, but the most important one on this slide is that I've passed the MCE 5 times before, and I'm up for renewal in April next year, along with a lot of other people. So you have to continue taking the MCE every couple of years once you've managed to pass. But once you've done it once, you will have absolutely no problems with passing over and over again. So just keep your wits about you, and I'm going to spend the next 40 minutes telling you all about how you can pass your MCE in terms of what the MCE actually entails. So we are going to have a quick look at the people on this call. So what's your experience level? So when I asked you guys to sign up for this webinar, I asked you to indicate what your level of experience was. So you can see here that the vast majority of people who signed up have been using Marketo for about 1 to 4 years. So there was a few people who've been 5+ years, a couple of people or a few people who were less than 1 year. This is what I'd expect. I'd expect people who are interested in the MCE to be in that kind of 1 to 4 year category. If you have 5+ years of experience, I want you to almost put down the phone, walk out to your nearest testing center, and just do it. Because there's something stopping you. Either you haven't had time, or you just haven't thought about it, or you've just decided that you suddenly want your MCE. Whatever it is, you can pass it. There is no question. If you've been using Marketo for 5+ years, especially if you've been an administrator, you will romp this in. This is not a problem. If you've been around for sort of less than 1 year, I would expect that you would have to have had some administrator experience to be able to pass the MCE. And in fact, it's actually really not possible to pass if you haven't been in the admin area of Marketo for a little while, probably for about 6 months. So if you are not an administrator, there may be some things in the exam that will be foreign to you. So as we go through, you'll start to see what those are. The Marketo Certified Expert Exam. All right, let's break it down. Basic logistics. We've got 75 questions, 90 minutes. Your minimum passing score is 70%. You need to attain 70% in each focus area to pass. So I'm going to have a look at the focused areas in a second. But it's not about, oh, if I get 70%, it doesn't matter if I don't know what the reports are called. No, that's not actually how it works. So you need to actually get a certain level of pass in each of the different exam focused areas in order to pass. So you can schedule an exam by creating an account and registering at Web Assessor. And you can do it in person in a testing center. You can do it remote by a proctored webcam, or you can do what I do every couple of years, come to Summit and do it in a room full of strangers and have a ball. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually do your exam. One tip, if you have Salesforce certifications or another type of certification that uses Web Assessor, you'll need to set up a separate account, because you can't do your Salesforce certifications and your Marketo certifications on the same Web Assessor account. Just requires putting in a different login. I got a bit confused once with that one, so I just thought I'd bring it out there. The exam focus areas. So we're going to hit on each of these individually. Program fundamentals, targeting and personalization, analytics and reporting, lead management, implementation and operations. So each of these is testing sort of a different part of the Marketo system. So you can, so you need to be able to nail 70%, as I said, of each of these. So, study tips. Don't be afraid of the exam. It's not an unfair test. What I'm not going to try to do in the next 45 minutes is tell you everything that you need to know about Marketo to pass the exam. No. This is about showing you perhaps where your gaps are. So I'll be able to tell you which things are actually going to pop up, and which types of areas you maybe haven't looked at a lot at. So you can't, as I said, you can't really pass the MCE if you've got no access to the admin areas. You just won't know what things are called. And what I'm going to do is bring up a bunch of things during this so that you can see, okay, I haven't used that much, so I really need to have a look at that. But the MCE primarily tests your ability to know what things are actually called. I'm going to stress this all the way through. So you could quite happily set up a program and all of its smart campaigns and everything perfectly, but not know the exact name of something. So acquisition program, cadence, time frame, whatever it is, if you don't know those specific terminologies from Marketo, it's going to make it difficult for you. So you need a broad base of knowledge, but it only tests the core product, not all the add-on modules. So no web personalization, no advanced analytics, no ABM, nothing like that. It's all about the standard Marketo. However, let me point out that even if you have not bought the events module, Marketo still considers that a core module, especially the webinar add-in for some reason. So even if you don't use webinars, you need to have a look at what it is. So we're going to look at things like that as we go through. Rule number 1, can't stress this enough. Take the time to read the question. Understand what Marketo is actually trying to test you on. Usually it's a very specific core concept, and sometimes, as I've put in my tip here, the answer is literally in the question. So as I go through, I'm going to start to give you some sample questions just to kind of help you out with the flavor of what it is you're going to be asked. So, for instance, this question on the screen here, you create an industry segmentation. You add the following segments: healthcare, education, and food services. How many total segments does your industry segmentation have? What Marketo is not trying to do is test if you can count. It's just not. It's trying to test to see if you have figured out what core functionality it's trying to test you on in this question, and then you can then extrapolate through. So you kind of go, okay, the 2 nonsensical answers, because this is a multiple choice test, the 2 nonsensical answers are 0 and 5. They're the outside ones here. So you're kind of like, okay, I've added 3 segments, but surely Marketo is not asking me to count to 3. No, it's not. It's asking you if you understand the core concept that it always needs a default segment. So the answer is going to be 4. So when you're looking at every single question, try to think through what is and this is my top tip for this whole webinar, try to think through what is the core concept that Marketo is trying to test you on here. And then the answer will be blatantly obvious and it will jump into your face. So breaking it down into all of those different fundamental areas. There are 4 different types of programs. We all know this: email, event, engagement, and default. Okay, cool. Not a heck of a lot's going to be asked about default, to be honest, because it doesn't really have anything that's specific to it, except things like acquisition, which we're going to go into shortly. But you need to understand the other 3. So how do email, event, and engagement differ from each other? What are the specifics of how these different program types differ from each other? What do they do that the others don't? Why do they exist? So so understand what your programs are for, what they actually do. So program fundamentals. Every marketing initiative in Marketo needs a program. Cool. Program's a container for local assets, local reports, automation. The thing here that I'm trying to stress is that when things are held inside a program, they're called local. So a local asset, local report. When something is held outside, it's called a global asset. So a global form, any kind of global report. That's always a fundamental difference that Marketo will try to test you on. Do you understand how local versus global assets function, especially forms? Program channels and statuses. So what I'm not going to do, again, is sit here and teach you how to use program channels. If you don't know how program statuses work, top to bottom, you need to go back and revise this, because Marketo fundamentally cares that people understand this concept, and for really good reason. You can't actually build reports and build success measurement in Marketo without understanding your channels and statuses. So you can't go back. So use the same step, number to go back and forth between channels. People can't go back in the program status, and each channel can only belong to one program type. Those are your key concepts here. So make sure that you understand and are using program statuses properly and really understand how that progression works. Acquisition program, both the favorite and horror of most people who use Marketo, and most people misunderstand it and use it badly. If you fundamentally don't know what I mean by acquisition program, you need to revise this concept. It will come up. What you are looking for here is the relationship between acquisition program and new names. So you can see by the screen that I've got here, I'm looking at the front screen of the program. So you get your members by program status and you get your results. You can see there's an acquired by number. How do people get acquired by programs? What are the different ways they can be acquired by programs? So looking through that and thinking through, okay, cool, is my form local to the program? Did I import a list directly into the program? Yes, acquisition covered. Did I not do those things? I may have to think about how acquisition is being recorded in this program. So the relationship between acquisition program and new names is actually really important. And part 2 of that is knowing how or why or when you need to set the acquisition program in the flow, especially if you're using a global form. So change data value, acquisition program equals whatever that program is going to be. For new leads created through the form, not local to a program, acquisition program must be set. Like I said, if you feel like your knowledge of acquisition program is a bit on the shaky side, there's some resources at the end of this particular section that will help you to read up on that. Okay, let's dive into specific program functionality. So if you, like I said, understanding how each of these program types differs and the functionality that programs have that's specific to that program is key to this part of the test. So email programs. What are the different types of A/B tests you can run? What are the 4 tiles? Literally, you stare at it all day, every day, but can you, off the top of your head, name from top left to bottom right exactly what those tiles are called? Marketo is testing if you remember the names of things. I can't stress this enough. Saying, do you know what those tiles are called? Do you know the different functions of the dashboard and what they are called? Because Marketo is going to come at you, kind of go, okay, how do you set up a subject line test? And it can't ask you to build anything. All it can do is ask you a multiple choice question. So the only thing Marketo can test here is, do you know what things are called? So, you know, goes, which of the following are not possible A/B tests? These types of questions are really fundamental to what the MCE is going to try to get to for email programs. Think about engagement programs. So I've stressed the concepts to learn here. Like I said, it's all about learning what the concepts mean. The unique concepts to engagement programs are things like cadence. Understand what streams and cadences are. What are transitions? What's the engagement score? What does it do? How is it calculated? What happens if you remove someone completely from a program rather than just pausing them? Is approving your emails enough to launch? Do you understand activation of streams? So those are specific terms that belong specifically to the engagement program that you need to know about. And you might be able to set up an engagement program in 5 minutes flat. But if you don't know specifically that the scheduling in an engagement program is called its cadence, you are going to find this hard. So you need to actually understand the wording. Event programs. So the very specific event program stuff that is likely to come up. Know the function that the webinar integration gives you at each step. So registered, attended, on demand. Things like on demand only exist in webinar programs. They don't exist in live events, for instance. So know what the check-in app is. If you've never seen it, get a tablet, head to your Google store or your Android store or your Apple store, download it for free, hook it up, make sure that you've got an event that's happening or that's at least marked as happening in the next 7 days. Open up your event check-in, play with it. Just have a look at the interface and what it does. So, for instance, in this type of section, When sending emails on a regular schedule or cadence, which program type should be used? Marketo is not testing that you know how to build any of these things. It's specifically testing, do you know that the word cadence is only used in Marketo terminology to control scheduling and engagement programs. It's not used anywhere else. So there can only be one answer. As soon as you figure out what Marketo is asking you, the core concept it's exploring, and it's literally telling you in the question here, like when sending emails on a regular cadence, what will you do? So just listen for the nuances of the question. So engagement, obviously. If any of that's foreign to you, we've got a couple of links here. So understanding programs, understanding email, event, and engagement programs. These are all docs links. You don't even have to have a Marketo login to get into these. But at the end of each section, what I've done is just underscore a few different resources that are going to be useful to you. So let's look at targeting and personalization. So the targeting and personalization section is all about smart lists. That's pretty much what it is. So do you know, and a little bit around segmentation. So we're going to go through both of those things, but you can upload lists of data in Marketo using the email address as the unique identifier. There's a reason why I've got that in bold. Please remember it. It will come up in maybe 4 or 5 different questions in different formats. So just be aware that that email address concept. So, however, most of the time we're going to be using smart lists. Okay, so let's talk about the types of things that's likely to come up around smart lists. Again, it's all about the terminology: triggers, filters, behaviors, demographics, non-activity. So, can you explain the actual difference between a trigger and a filter? Should be pretty easy. Sometimes people get really confused when faced with like a 4-question exam question, but just keep in mind, this is not going to be testing rocket science, all right? This is just going to be, do you know what triggers and filters are available in smart lists? And can you tell the difference between a trigger and a flow step, or a filter and a flow step? So what's available in a smart list and what isn't? For instance, sample question: if I use 2 triggers together in a smart list like this demonstration shows, what's the expected behavior? So I've got person must meet both conditions for the trigger to fire, person must meet either condition, this can't be done, or it requires an additional filter to choose which trigger will fire. Again, nonsensical answers. We've got C and D straight out the back door. Obviously this can be done. Marketo lets you drag in 2 triggers all the time. So, and what the underlying concept that Marketo is trying to test here is that you know that in a triggered smart campaign, 2 triggers together is always an or condition, not an and. So so this type of question you should be breezing through. Segmentations. Segmentations define subsets of the database. They're mutually exclusive. They're needed for dynamic content. They're set up in the lead database. They impact your entire database. Bam. That's what you need to know about segmentations. Those are the core concepts of what segmentations are and do. You could get kind of an outlier. Like, could you explain the difference between a smart list and a segmentation? So you could get a list of functionality and say, are these present in a smart list or a segmentation? So just understanding the difference between those 2 things is pretty key to that type of question. Do you know the difference between a send alert and a send email? One sends to a lead, one sends internally. When would you use an alert? Mostly for alerting sales when a new lead is generated. That's the primary purpose that Marketo lists in all of its documentation. We know as Marketo practitioners that it could be used for lots of things. Don't overthink these types of questions. You know what a send alert is. You know what a send email is. Just answer what it's asking you. Don't try to extrapolate out into, oh my God, I've been using Marketo for so long, I could make pretty much anything work at this point. No, don't go there. Just answer the question that's being asked. And all Marketo is testing here is that you know the difference between the send email and the send alert flow step. That's all it's doing. Okay, tokens. We all know that there's lots of tokens. I can tell you now, don't overcomplicate it. Marketo is not going to test you on your encyclopedic memory of all of the system tokens that are in the system. No, it's not going to do that. Lead, company, my tokens. Bam. You know what they are, you know where they're used. That's what you need to know. So lead tokens, my tokens can be used in assets, they can be used in flow steps. There's a link here that says that shows you a tokens overview, so you can read through the tokens. Focus on lead, company, and my tokens. This picture is just of the different my tokens that you can have. It's good to know what all of them do. Nobody is going to ask you, and I put this here for a reason, you are not going to be asked what type of code would be used in a velocity script or email script. It's not going to happen. That's not what Marketo is testing here. It's testing the basic concepts that you know where each of these token types should be used. The other concept that will come up is token inheritance. So what I mean by that, this one is another one of those ones. When you hear the word inheritance, there is only one place in the whole of Marketo that that term is used. Seriously, and it's for tokens, and it's specifically for my tokens. Tokens set at the folder level are inherited by the programs that are underneath it. Bam, that's it. That's all you need to know. Marketo's testing, you know what inherited tokens means, the actual terminology. If you don't know what it means, that's just going to be Swahili to you. You just need to understand what that concept means. And when you think inherited, think tokens, think programs. So, sample type of smart list question that you might get. Smart list in Smart Campaign, you use all of the following except filters only, triggers, flow steps, filters, and triggers. So it seems like this question is asking you what you can use in Smart Campaigns, right? It's really not. It's actually asking you, if you know the difference between filters, triggers, and flow steps. So you can't use a flow step in a smart list. Bam. There's your answer right there. So look at what the question is actually asking you. It might seem like you're reading it, you're like, oh, smart campaign, all those things can happen in a smart campaign. I'm so confused. It's not what it's asking. A smart list can use, it can't use flow steps. Relevant docs here. There's a complete tokens overview underneath this link, and I've got a best practices for smart list guide here that will go through all the key concepts that you might need to know. All right, this is the one that scares everybody. Everybody who's ever gone for the MCE walks in going, geez, I hope I know the program analytics questions that it asks. Let's break this one down. There's no way around it. You actually need to know the names of the standard report types. Even if you are the type of person who exports all of your data out of Marketo and reports somewhere else, you might put it into Salesforce, you might be putting it into RCE. Doesn't matter. For the MCE, you need to know the standard reporting. Nothing will come up other than the standard reporting. And if Marketo is testing, you know what each report type is called and what function it has. But they'll only test you on 2 or 3 of them. So know your lead performance, know your email performance, know your landing page performance, and your program performance. Those are the 4 big guns. So, but got a list of them all here and a little bit of an overview about what each of them does. You don't need to know any more information than that. But Marketo has in the past, in the MCE, had questions where it just misnames the report just slightly and tries to test if you know exactly what the names of the reports are. It's a bit tricky and sneaky, but that's the way they get you in multiple choice questions. So, period cost. If somebody asked you, how does ROI get calculated in Marketo? You need to know what the R will get you and what the I will get you. So return on investment, you need to know the return, which is going to be your opportunity data, and investment, which is how much did you spend. The I is period cost. So period cost is needed for many reports to even work. So just understand what a period cost is, that it's linked to ROI, and that it's used in reports. So using custom columns in reports. It's a standalone, it's a multiple choice test. You're not going to be asked to build a custom column. You just need to know that they exist and where they are. So standalone smart lists are built. They're then used in a lead performance report in order to build a custom column. So if this is not something you've seen before or played with before, do look it up, do play it, and make sure that that you understand how that lead performance report can be customized. It's pretty much the only report in Marketo that can be customized this way. So it's just understanding what that means. So, bit of a sample question around reports. You might get something along the lines of, which of the following email reports is automatically created and populates immediately following the email send? Okay, cool. What do you need to look at here? First, you need to look at which ones actually exist. Bam, B is out. Email delivery performance is not a thing. It's not even the name of a report. But what you also need to see is in that question, it's saying automatically created and populates immediately. Every report type in Marketo needs to be created manually. There's none that are automatically created, except dashboards. So Marketo is testing that you understand that the dashboards in email programs and in engagement programs are considered reports. So that could fall in under the analytics section somewhere. So email dashboard would be the actual answer here. So links to some relevant docs here to actually find your way. Basic reporting, report types. This is the area where it just fundamentally comes down to knowing what things are called. Because they can't ask you to build a report, they can't ask you to change it, they can't ask you to build a subscription, they can't ask you to do any of that. All they can do is ask you what reports do what. And so understanding that gets you 99% of the way there. So let's look at lead management. This is for my friend Grace, if you're on the line. The email address thing is so important, critical. You need to burn it into your brain. You need to absolutely burn into your brain what it is that is popping up for email reports. So you need the email address, plain and simple. So a new lead can enter the database in one of the following ways. You can have there's 5 different ways that a lead can get into the Marketo database. The 2 that I've highlighted in green are the email address ones. Filling out a form via its list upload. Either of those happens, the email address is used for dedupe. Marketo is testing you know how to dedupe leads based on where they're coming from. And manually, if you add a lead in manually, it does not use anything for dedupe. That's something that some people fall down on. So just the form, just the list upload. Email address, even if you fundamentally have made a change, there is a way you can change that it's email address and something else. But email address is always important. You always need to know it. Okay, lead management. The lead management section is all about the forms editor. If you haven't spent significant time in the forms editor, you need to do so in order to pass your MCE. So these 6 concepts absolutely will come up in the exam. And you'll notice that I have bolded the terms that you need to know the meaning of. So exactly what are stored values? What are hidden fields? What is progressive profiling? What's an advanced thank you page? What's a lightbox and when can you use it? What's a visibility rule and how can you use it? You need to know these 6 concepts. So know your forms editor in detail, especially what things are called. There's going to be some questions around it. This is kind of primarily where the lead management section goes. So make sure you get those concepts. And in a multiple choice test, they might use terms that sound remarkably close to the ones that are the real terms, but they're just not. So just know what they are. That's my number 1 tip. Know what these things are, know what they're called, know where they live, know what they do. So a sample form question here. Form editor allows you to edit all the following except the labels, font and size of the fields, the web page's form is on, and the copy and the form button. This is yet another type of let's understand what Marketo is actually testing you on. It's not testing you on the form editor at all. It's testing that you understand that the form is separate from the web page. So the second you see like form editor and web page in the same question, your brain should be going ding, no, that's wrong. So the web page the form is on is the answer here. It does not allow you to do that. So just be again, quite specific that you understand what the question is asking you. All right, let's look at the operations section. I had to search far and wide for a picture of the little Munchkin here, but the Munchkin code. You don't need to know how to do it. You don't need to know all of its inferred data. You don't need to know exactly every technical piece around how the Munchkin code works. You do need to know that it goes on a page, that it's a tag or a type of cookie that allows us to track web page visits and page clicks, that it's automatically on landing pages, but you have to add it to your own websites. It tracks anonymous and known visitors, depending on what state they're in, and it can collect some inferred data from the visitor's IP address. And it's probably a good thing to know what kinds of inferred data it can collect. Again, what are the names of things? So one concept that has come up in the MCE in the past, knowing that you have to become known on each individual domain. So if you put your Munchkin code on multiple web pages across multiple domains, if someone fills out a form on one page, they become known on that domain, but if they run around on the other domain, they'll still be anonymous on that domain. Somebody has to become known, so either fill out a form or be sent an email, and then and click a link and land on that individual domain for the Munchkin code to connect that person with both of those domains. So knowing how that domain behavior works, it's actually one of those weird, tricky questions that comes up in the MCE. Spam. Let me say, you do not need to be an internationally renowned expert on privacy legislation to pass your MCE. No. All you need to know, and I'm putting this one out there for all of the wonderful folks who are going to be watching this on record from Europe and from the US, that you do not need to be a CAN-SPAM, GDPR, Australian privacy principles, or any other legislation. You just need to understand that some jurisdictions have different rules. That's it. So people who are taking the MCE come from all over the world. You're not expected to know the rules of each other's country, but you are expected to know that it could possibly be different depending on where the person you are emailing lives. So you do need to stay abreast of privacy obligations in the jurisdiction that you're emailing to. That's the concept that Marketo is trying to test that you understand. Lead scoring. Again, don't need to be a master of lead scoring. There's 2 questions on a 75 question test that are dedicated to lead scoring, one on its strategy and one on its mechanics. So you need to know behavior versus demographic. What do those terms mean? And a little bit about the different roles that different people in your organization should play in defining what lead scoring rules are. So I've given a link here. And honestly, I think everybody should read this anyway. It's still one of the most useful ebooks in the Marketo ecosystem, especially in the Marketo resources area right now. It's called The Definitive Guide to Lead Scoring. It's about 8 years old and it's still relevant and it's still good. So if you read this, everything you need to know about lead scoring, especially for the MCE, is in that book. But don't overcook it. Just don't go overboard on studying hours and hours on lead scoring. You need to understand behavior versus demographic, know the mechanics, know vaguely sort of the different roles sales versus marketing play in building lead scoring models. Do you know what a communication limit is? Yes, you probably all do. You probably know it's used to limit the number of emails that are received, but did you know that operational emails don't count towards the communication, communication limits? So Marketo is going to ask if you know that or not. Essentially, that one's not rocket science. Communications either work or they don't, and you set them up in the admin, and they're all about limiting over communication. And while we're on the subject of transactional, operational versus marketing emails, There's this awesome warning that's been in Marketo since like the day it was born. This little yellow little yellow guy. So it's going, you have chosen to ignore unsubscribe settings. Use only for situations where the recipient cannot consider the email as unsolicited commercial email. That's so old as to be a little bit embarrassing. It's not about being unsolicited anymore. It's just about being commercial. So the fact that a Marketo operational email is used for non-commercial transactional email is what you need to know. And the email settings is where it happens. So it actually still kind of makes me laugh that if you click on that learn more about anti-spam laws link, then you get sent to Wikipedia, which is kind of fun. Fun facts about Marketo. Okay, so hard versus soft bounce. I can tell you right now, Marketo is not going to throw you a curly question like, which category of soft bounce is X? No. It's testing whether you know the difference between soft and hard and what happens if something is marked as a soft versus hard bounce. And the vast majority of these questions are around hard bounce if the email address is invalid, marks the email as invalid, and Marketo never tries to email them again. That simple. Soft bounces, Marketo is going to keep trying to email them. This is not a rocket science kind of deep down understanding everything about email deliverability kind of concept. It's a hard versus soft bounce. Do you know the basic difference between the two and what Marketo is going to do in each of those circumstances? So, wrapping up around the relevant docs, around the definitive guide to lead scoring, around enabling communication limits. Do you have an idea about operational emails and forms? There's one other sneaky little question that sometimes Marketo throws in there. Do you know the difference between email marketing versus marketing automation? It's a fun one. It's awfully subjective. We found a lovely blog that was written ages and ages ago. It's got to be at least 6 years old. That's called Email Marketing versus Marketing Automation. If you read that, you know what there is to know about that particular thing. But it's kind of like an airy-fairy out there kind of industry definition. Do you know the difference between what marketing automation gives you versus email marketing? So just make sure that you touch base with that one. It could be a little bit of a tricky one when you hit it. So, wrap up. The do's and don'ts of the MCE exam. Now I'm going to go through this in reasonable detail now. Do you read the question? Do read the question and figure out what's actually asking of you. This is a multiple choice question. It can't ask you to build anything. It can't ask you to give a treatise on the do's and don'ts of syncing leads directly with Salesforce or not. It's not going to ask you that. Expect wordplay and trickery. That's the only tools they have in their arsenal for this type of test. Seriously. So the only way you can avoid wordplay and trickery is to read the question and don't overthink it. So like I said before, everything can sound true if you stare at it long enough. It really can. Like last time I took it, I stared at a question and just went, wow, I can make all of those things true. And I had another question where I went, I wouldn't do any of those things. And then I reread the question and went, what is the best option of all the options below? And I'm like, okay, if I was forced to use one of those options, I would take this one. So there's often some strange wording in the question, but please don't overthink it. And usually your first instinct is probably going to get you through. So do study the definitions of important concepts. So it's not enough to know that engagement programs have streams of emails that go every in a regular schedule. You need to know that that's called a cadence. That is what it is. So so it's really important to study those definitions. Don't focus on workflows in your study. Marketo literally can't test if you know how to plug webinar software in. It can't test if you know how to set up roles and permissions. It can test that you know what a role is, what a permission is. So it's more about what it's called and where to find it. If I said, what's a tag and where would you find it? You should immediately be going, oh, that's in the admin area and it's under, and it's, it's where you set up channels and custom tags. Bingo, that's what you'll need to know. But if you weren't an administrator, that would be a hard thing to know. So if you're not an admin, like I was saying at the beginning, you might want to get an admin to kind of help you through that section of Marketo, because it can be really difficult to learn those things and to know what things are called if you don't look at them every day. Most importantly, do trust yourself and be confident. Have a bit of fun with this. You like Marketo, Marketo likes you. They want to get people to certify. If you've done the work, you'll ace this. This is not going to be something that they're not going out of their way to try to make this monumentally difficult. Just trying to get to have you prove a fundamental knowledge of the Marketo system. So trust yourself, be confident. If you've done the work, you're going to do well. So thanks for watching this. We have a bit of time for a couple of questions if anyone wants to send them through the chat. But there's a couple of sort of comments and stuff like that in the chat, but no actual questions at the moment. Yes, I'll be sharing the deck afterwards. When I mentioned that I was giving you my guide to the MCE, basically I'm going to package this up in a PDF and send it to you guys so that you have this after the fact. And we'll be sending a recording to everybody after the fact as well. It's an awful lot of people signed up from overseas.